Okay, this morning I want to read from James chapter 3, verse 1. This book of James is quite a book. So listen up, please. James 3, verse 1. It's only one verse this time because there's a lot to talk about. It says, "My brethren, be not many masters." In the Revised Version, it reads, "Be not many teachers." Maybe we should add preachers too. Yes. "Brethren, be not many teachers, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation." And I guess we would have to notice that James included himself when he said we. So, we can say the Apostle James truly is getting our attention with a verse like this, a statement like this, for sure. So James teaches here in the other verses that we've read many important teachable thoughts. So, evidently, as we've read this verse, it takes the right kind of teacher to be a teacher. If we're going to teach and influence others, we have to be the right kind of individual. So this verse strongly says that, well, as we've always said, practice what you preach. The teacher, the preacher, has to match his teaching with his way of life. And there is a lot of responsibility in being a teacher, preacher, leader. It's not for everyone because there's people involved, a lot of people involved. And there's the right and wrong direction that has to be presented, must be presented. And there's the good and the bad results. And in life, there's a lot of consequences. Remember, we studied earlier from another standpoint that as many as the Lord loves, He rebukes and chastens. So it's important for a teacher and a preacher to teach the right kind of things, to help people stay on track. Yeah, to stay on track and not have to experience the chastening of the Lord, the rebuke of the Lord. So you see, a teacher has a lot on his hands, or her hands, in Sunday school class. Has to be proper teaching. It must be thorough teaching. It has to be teaching that is remembered too. I don't know how many times I've heard how sermons can go over people's heads. And that's why we try to be so definitely pointing out points, because teaching needs to be applied and teaching needs to be remembered. And of course it needs to be from the heart. A good teacher is not doing it as a business. So anyway, let's give this some thought as we look at a couple of men in the Bible and how good a teacher they were or were not at times. And the first one I think about is Noah. We don't think of him as being a teacher, preacher. We think of him as being a builder, and he was. It's like I feel like I'm a teacher, preacher, farmer. A lot's involved. But we do easily read the story of Noah, and we're impressed. However, we think about all that water, don't we? We think about that great big boat that he built. Yeah, we think about all those animals and how long they had to ride out that storm. Those are the things that we think about. And how about all that devastation? Can't you imagine what they thought about in there as they thought everything outside is gone? Have you ever thought, when you drive away from your home, and now every time when I drive away from home, I ask the Lord to keep our house. If Nancy's in there, keep Nancy. Have you ever thought about what it would be like if you came home and your house would burn down? I've thought that more than once. Wouldn't that be devastating? I don't care how much insurance you have on something, something like that would be devastating. Well, that was Noah and his family. Everything but that ark was gone. And even if they landed, who would want to live in that ark forever? Plenty of room if you let the animals out. Yeah, but I don't think I want to stay there. That's what we think about Noah. However, what about Noah himself? He had to be a mighty teacher and a mighty preacher along with his hard work. He had to live a God-fearing life, a God-respecting life. He must have, because that's why he was chosen. He was that kind of a person. So this is a part of the obvious as far as a teacher or preacher is concerned, and really any of us. But he found grace in the eyes of the Lord because he was the kind of a person that he was. And don't you love that? I sure do. I'm sure that they couldn't find any flaws in his teaching. I mean, he had enough refining experiences that his life was golden. And if a person's life is golden, their talk, their teaching, their preaching is going to be golden. He did it. So I think of this as far as Noah's concerned. I have to believe that Noah was quite a teacher, quite a preacher, just to hold his family together. Wouldn't that be something to think about? Can't you imagine all those things, everything, kind of like what is alluring to our children today and splitting up families today, had to be back in that time. Don't you, as you've experienced life, watched, observed, haven't you seen how families get so war-torn and split up? I think it's the devil's business. I think he zeroes in on the family. Church family, personal families. Look at your own life, your own family, and the difficulties you've had. Someone out there has been trying to split us all up. Come right in our back door, maybe the front door to undo us. So think of the extra that Noah's kids had to endure because of their dad. That crazy fool building a great big boat on dry ground, and there hadn't been any rain from heaven to float a twig, let alone a big boat. But he still held his family together. He had to be some kind of a person. Teacher, preacher, daddy. So that's convincing to me. Another thought about Noah. I have to believe that Noah was quite a teacher, preacher, because of the tough times that they had, and it was for so long. I think from all prior to God talking to him, and when they started laying the first plank out there to build that boat, and that was going to last for 120 years. You think of that long time and the tough times that the whole family had to endure. Add all this up, and what do you conclude about this man? He had to be a God-fearing, God-loving man, a good teacher of truth and righteousness. And the more I think of it, the more I appreciate a man like Noah. And why can't we be a Noah in our own time? God-fearing, God-loving, faithful. And here's another thing about Noah. I have to believe Noah was quite a teacher, preacher, when he had to instruct and manage all those who helped him on that ark. I believe there were more than just his 3 sons carving out those logs and putting things together. It was a huge undertaking. You just imagine all the angles of construction. And they feel like they have found Noah's ark. And they have a center there to show you pieces of this and that and the other thing. But as they've been able with their electronic devices to observe what they have observed, there was a genius at work bringing that whole project to where it needed to be. Noah was quite a teacher and a preacher to go with it. Yes, indeed, it was a big undertaking. Now, we all are pretty determined people, aren't we? I mean, we've been through enough that our teeth are kind of getting worn down from the grit and grind. But I have to believe, too, that with all that flood experience and construction and getting ready and what have you, that Noah had to be quite a preacher, teacher, manager. I'm going to believe that. And he stood alone. I don't know how many helpers bailed out on him. Probably got him educated how to do this and how to do that. And some of them said adios. We get those experiences. There weren't many teachers in that time. I don't imagine Noah was able to go to anyone and get Saturday night encouragement for Sunday morning's whatevers. He was only a man, and he was a total man, a real man. So I'm asking you, does that challenge? Does that challenge you men? Does that challenge even you ladies? You ladies can be proud that your man goes to church. Probably should do some other things a little better, but at least they're on track. But Noah was that kind of a man, and I have to salute that kind of a preacher, teacher, manager. I want to read you something. It'll take me a little while here, but just hang on. Recently, this man said, I was helping a preacher in a revival. And this man said, on a Tuesday morning, this other person came to my room at the hotel, very depressed, and he said this. Last night after the service, The teacher, this was a preacher talking, the teacher of one of my largest young men's classes asked me to stay and talk a while with him. He was as nearly broken-hearted as any man I'd ever seen. He sat at my desk and sobbed a little while and then blurted out, "Doctor," or preacher, the other preacher, "I have to resign my Sunday school class. I made one big mistake and it has ruined my usefulness as a teacher." He said, "I was sent to New York to a buyers convention. We buyers were cooped up for 2 days, from morning until late evening. After we finished the last day, one of my friends from another city said, 'Hey, let's get a cup of coffee and a piece of pie.'" Now that was innocent. We relaxed for a little while, and then he suggested that we go to a show down the street here. When we stopped in front of the show, I realized it was a burlesque show. I hesitated for a moment and started to tell him that I had never been in such a show, and I didn't feel comfortable with this place for me to go into. But he convinced me and I went in. He bought the tickets and we went in and sat down. We'd been in there about a half an hour when someone behind me reached over and touched me on my shoulder. When I turned around, an accusing voice said, "Fancy meeting you here." "I certainly didn't expect to see you in a burlesque show." He was a member of my Sunday school class. The teacher wept silently for a while, and he said, "I believe I would give my right arm to live that evening all over again." How many times has that happened? Someone else puts you on the spot, and for just a moment, you're tricked into doing something that you never would have done any other time. I tell you, folks, it takes a real person to be a Noah. Then, too, how about Moses? Yeah, he was just another Jewish baby, wasn't he? His parents were a little more on the ball, but he was just another baby. However, God had a reason for him, and I'm going to say this: God has a reason for all of us. Maybe not like a Moses, but we all have a reason. But anyway, when you follow the life story of Moses, you know the story of his discovery in the bulrushes, and how his sister kept him and watched him. And then when Pharaoh's daughter found him, she talked with her, and Pharaoh's daughter said, "Well, take him home and let his mother take care of him," actually. You know that story. But he grew up, and later he had to flee because he killed a slave driver. So he spent 40 years out there around Mount Sinai herding sheep. Of course, God was just getting him ready, you know. Then there was the burning bush and his call to go back to Egypt, and he did. 10 plagues followed. And then he took them out, and off they went to Sinai. Now Moses was headed into being a top-notch leader and a teacher, probably a preacher, you could say. But he made a mistake and didn't give God the glory on one occasion. And because of that, Moses didn't get to go into the promised land. But anyway, he was a good man, a great man. God expected a lot of him, and God expects a lot of those who stand out for him. And that's all right. We want to be a person that God can count on, that God can be proud of. So this whole set of thinking here, this one verse tells us, now don't be in a hurry to be a teacher, don't be in a hurry to be a preacher. And I think that pans out sometimes. It looks like somebody's going to be and going to be and going to be, and it doesn't end up being. But bless those who chart the course and stay. But Moses was a dedicated man, faithful, true blue. But yet God expected a whole lot of him, and he didn't get to go into the promised land. I think that's a good lesson. But God bless Moses for all that he did, and God bless every one of us as we try to do what the Lord wants us to do. So I want to close with this, and I think you'll enjoy it. I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather one should walk with me than merely show the way. The eye's a better pupil and more willing than the ear. Fine counsel is confusing, but example is always clear. And the best of all, the preachers are the men who live their creeds. For to see the good in action is what everyone needs. I can soon learn how to do it if you let me see it done. I can watch your hands in action, but your tongue too fast may run. Yeah. And the lectures you deliver may be wise and true, but I'd rather get my lesson by observing what you do. For I may mistake you in the high advice you give, but there's no mistaking how you act and how you live. I had a Sunday school teacher that quoted that to me more times than I could count. And I think it still tells the story. Be not many teachers. And for sure, don't go into a burlesque show. And I would say, stay away from the gambling casinos and a whole lot of other things. Amen? Amen. Okay.